Robbie, what's on your radar?
Well, jury deliberations have begun in Sarah Palin's libel lawsuit against the New York Times. The jury met for 2 hours on Friday and are continuing this morning. Theoretically, we could have a verdict at any moment. If you only listen to the mainstream coverage of the trial, you're probably expecting Palin to lose. And believe me, that could absolutely be the case. I'll get into this in a moment, but it's a genuinely difficult question, this case. Both sides have raised a number of interesting points. The jury might very well find that the New York Times treatment of Palin, while a reprehensible smear, does not rise to the level of libel. But there's a certain smug certainty in the MSM that the Times is going to win this case. And to that I say, well, we'll see. Here are some examples of that certainty. Last week, Slate described, quote, the moment Sarah Palin's testimony fell apart. The Washington Post has covered the matter exhaustively. Columnist Kathleen Parker wrote that if Palin wins, quote, her victory would mean handing a shield to the powerful against scrutiny by and for the people, the very ones she once hoped to represent. A shield to the powerful? Well, I don't know about that. Let's take a closer look at what's at stake in this trial. So Palin is suing the New York Times over an editorial published on June 14, 2017, in the wake of the congressional baseball game shooting, where a deranged gunman, a Democrat and supporter of Bernie Sanders, shot and wounded Republican House Minority Whip Steve Scalise. The editorial, called America's Lethal Politics, laments that this is a country where political extremists target members of the Republican and Democratic parties. The op-ed draws a parallel between the shooting of Scalise and the earlier shooting of Gabby Giffords, a Democratic member of the House in Tucson, in 2011. The op-ed implied that the shooter in that crime, Jared Lee Loughner, was right-wing and inspired by campaign materials produced by Sarah Palin, which had placed gun crosshairs over Giffords. In reality, the crosshairs were over Giffords' district, not Giffords, and more importantly, there is no evidence Loughner saw the map. Indeed, there's no evidence Loughner's beef with Giffords could be traced to a discernible right-wing political agenda. He subscribed to random conspiracy theories, he hated organized religion, he had mental health problems. There was a much clearer link between politics and the Scalise shooting than there was between politics and the Giffords shooting, but the New York Times made it sound like, well, the reverse. So after the editorial was published, it was swiftly criticized by many on the right, including by Ross Douthat, a conservative columnist for The Times, who emailed the opinion page editor, James Bennett, and said, while he didn't usually complain about the unsigned editorials, inevitably expecting to disagree with them, this one was much more obviously flawed on a factual basis. So Bennett posted a correction. Years later, after running the infamous Tom Cotton op-ed, he resigned from the position. Now, Palin swiftly filed suit. On the underlying facts, there's actually little disagreement. No one is claiming that what the Times said about her was correct. But from the Times' point of view, it was simply an error born of ignorance. Bennett got it wrong, and that's that. Plain old mistake. According to Palin, it wasn't just wrong, it was libel. Now, to qualify as libel against a public official, such as Palin, a statement can't just be wrong. It has to satisfy the standard of actual malice, i.e. it must have been wrong deliberately, or it must have been a wrong based in reckless disregard for the truth. So it's fairly clear that Bennett did not write the incorrect sentences on purpose. Palin's argument, therefore, relies on the idea that he screwed up so badly, he was so negligent, that his actions rise to the level of recklessness. During the trial, Palin's lawyers made very strong arguments that this was in fact the case. A staffer wrote the editorial, submitted it to Bennett, who then rewrote it substantially, adding the false claims. Palin's attorneys have presented plenty of evidence that the truth of the matter, that Giffords' attempted murder had nothing to do with Palin, was easily accessible to Bennett, but in his haste and dereliction of duty, he missed it. Indeed, as Palin's attorneys argued at trial, opinion page staffers circulated research material that acquitted Palin of any involvement. So now the problem for Palin, and the best thing the New York Times has on its side, is the difficulty Palin has in proving that the erroneous editorial has harmed her. The Palin camp was not really able to demonstrate, in my opinion, how the editorial harmed her reputation or what economic opportunities she lost because of it. Remember this?
Oh my God! Wow! You guys, you cannot believe.
Is that Tina Fey?
She put it on her glass first. Governor Sarah Palin! Holy snap! Wow! And she was rapping! My goodness, can you guys believe? She had every lyric to Sir Mix-a-Lot's Baby Got Back. Wow. This might be the most shocked I've ever been on this show. Wow.
That was Palin competing on The Masked Singer in 2020. It's actually the best argument the New York Times has on its side, that its really bad editorial did not actually dim Palin's fame or fortune. How the jury will rule remains to be seen. So it's an interesting case because, look, they got it wrong. They admit they got it wrong. No one is arguing that the editorial was good or correct. It wrongly drew this false equivalence between the Scalise shooting and the Gifford shooting. Palin had nothing to do with the Gifford shooting. That guy was crazy. There's no evidence whatsoever linking him liking her posts or whatever. So that's like established fact. Now, it's kind of difficult to say because their point is, no, we just made a really bad error. And it's like, well, how bad was the error? And they're saying, well, look, we have all this research that we try to correct our error. You know, we've published other things clearly saying Palin was not at fault, and then Palin's camp is going around and saying, well, yeah, that's evidence of how badly you screwed this one up. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of journalists want to make it about a broader kind of First Amendment issue. You know, does this chill free speech if the New York Times loses this case? I'm not so sure that it does, because this is a very specific and really obvious wrong thing that they got. But the problem for them is, you know, libel was supposed to protect people's reputation. There has to be a consequence if you wrongly damage someone's reputation. Right. And in the era we live in now, so that was a big thing in the 1800s. Now it's like, who changed their mind about Sarah Palin because of this? Who liked her and now doesn't like her? That person doesn't exist. So they did not do a good job. They were struggling to identify some tangible way that she has suffered reputationally or she's lost economic opportunities because of it.
It's a fascinating question because today, and forget even back then, but today, if the New York Times criticizes a Republican, especially if a New York Times criticizes a Republican falsely,
it's almost a gift to them.
It's a gift to them. So, like, if that is actually the condition that they need to set up in order to make a libel case or a defamation case, then there's absolutely nothing the Times could say except praise.
They could endorse her.
How dare you? How dare you sing my praises in the pages of the New York Times? I have a primary coming up.
Right.
AOC has joked before that during a government shutdown, she was contemplating endorsing Republicans who wouldn't, open the government back up. She was just Instagrams, say nice things about them.
Oh, that's very
just
funny.
End their political careers
it's
right there.
Very funny. It shows you the times we live in.
Right, and so so the broader question is an interesting one. Like, what if you say something right 10 times, and then you say it wrong the 11th time on a YouTube video or in a column?
Right.
Like, should you then have your paper destroyed?
Right.
For that one time, if you corrected it as quickly as you can? On the other hand, there ought to be some effort put into the factual statements that you're making. And that's where actual malice and negligence comes in. You have, like, if you don't reach out for comment, if you don't Google, if you don't do a little bit of background research,
right.
Those are elements that can build the idea that you had some malice there.
That was a key aspect of the Rolling Stone libel suits over the UVA story, which were largely successful. The Nicole Aramo, the University of Virginia dean, who sued because there was reporting in Rolling Stone saying that she had said specific statements that made it sound like she was taking sexual assault not seriously enough. This is connecting to Jackie, that famous story everyone's heard about. And she won that lawsuit because she said, well, I never said those quotes. And the Rolling Stone did they didn't reach out to comment for various people. They didn't try to verify, the identity of the assailant, who didn't exist. So because they had not done all those basic things you would have to do, you can't publish a story about someone relying on entirely anonymous information without even getting I'm not going to comment from them, without verifying they exist. So
checking basic things.
Checking such
like, was there a party that night?
Right. Was there a party that night? Does this person exist?
Right.
Even if I'm not naming them, I have to look them up on Facebook, see this is a real person.
Right.
And it was not a real person.
Right.
So because they did all that, they failed to do all that, they were able to be sued and they lost. So now this is not a screw up nearly as bad as that,
right.
But it is a screw. I mean, it's a screw up. It's not defensible. It's crazy to me the claim made it through that, and James Bennett, and then he's not fired or forced to resign over the Tom Cotton op-ed.
Right.
This is a much greater act of. I mean, I don't even think the Tom Cotton op-ed was negligent. I think it was perfectly fine to run it. I don't
Aren't
agree
they
with
now
it,
calling for the military to go into Ottawa?
Yes, no, I made that joke over the weekend that now everyone who bashed that Tom Cotton op-ed is now saying, send in the UN peacekeeping force to occupy the Ambassador Bridge. Jesus. Which I think we're going to talk about the truckers more on the show later.
Yeah, we are.
But it is actually producing an interesting hypocrisy on that.
It is.
On that front.
It sure is. But yeah, it's a tough call because how bad are your takes allowed to be until they creep into defamation is an interesting question.
one that keeps you and I awake at night.
No doubt. Because, and where does that, obviously that applies to any published content anywhere.
Yeah.
If you tweet something that turns out to be wrong, or you retweet somebody who got something wrong and you didn't check before you retweeted,
Yep. And they draw. I mean, libel draws a distinction between opinion statements and factual statements. That was a difficulty.
Right.
So then the Covington kids, when they were suing, ran into that difficulty, and they ended up settling with the media companies. But that the reporting about them was wrong. But it was like, well, is that a factual assertion? Like, you're staring at somebody aggressively. Is that's like my opinion that you're staring? It was a stare or a leer. So,
and the biggest cheerleader of tightening these libel laws for a long time was Donald Trump. And he then said at a rally, a classic Trump, he's like, my advisors told me, if I tighten these libel laws, that I could probably be sued very easily. So I think I'm going to back off of that. And I love how he just says
he just says it like
he just says it all. But that is a very important point.
Yeah.
Everybody out there who is cheerleading tightening defamation laws, watch your Twitter fingers. Right. Watch your YouTube comment fingers. Watch your op-ed that you send to the local paper
elsewhere
fingers.
in the English-speaking world, you can't just say whatever you want about figures in Europe and in Australia. They can't print things that are true because you'll be sued into oblivion.
We have a very unique thing going on.
Right. Let's not blow it. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to your radar coming up next.